go along, as you well know probably already. I moved here in 2012 with my husband and our, at the time, 5 children. I have 7 children now. One after 42 years of age, which really throws a monkey wrench in your life when you think, you know, we were done. But it's been a joy. It's been a joy and a blessing, and it's really helped me just grow as a person, grow spiritually. You know, those things that God pulls you through kicking and screaming, you grow from. Right. Like I said, I have 7 children. My oldest will be 21 this year. She is already out of the house. My second one has graduated high school this year. And of course, the youngest is 5 months old. So I have a big range of children in there. I have 5 girls and 2 boys. So the boys do feel well outnumbered. I'm originally from West Virginia. I don't know if I mentioned that yet or not. You probably realize I'm not from around here. That's usually the first thing people ask me. And when I first moved here, everybody I ran into said, "Are you from Georgia?" And I'm like, "Georgia? No, West Virginia, not that far south." What led me to Miss Mason was just a general wanting a different education for my children. I grew up in public school. Homeschool, back when I was young, to think about homeschoolers was you had to have a jumper, Birkenstocks, you never cut your hair, you made your own bread, you know, that whole stereotype. I mean, even in the hills of West Virginia, that's just what you thought. I had bought this set of Miss Mason's books from, I can't even remember what the publication was. I saw it in there and was just really intrigued as to what I had heard from Miss Mason and some of these quotes, and I thought, that's what I want for my kids. But I didn't know how to apply it. I didn't have anybody around me that read Miss May. You know, I would talk to my family and they would look at me like, "You want to send your kids to school, right?" You know, no, I'm not. And of course, especially when they get to the high school years, and we'll talk more about that later, I had so many people say, "Oh, it's wonderful that you're preschooling and you're homeschooling, but what are you going to do when they get to high school?" And it's like, if I can do it while they're little, I can continue to do it as they grow. So that we've kind of come through our own evolution of Charlotte Mason in our household, according to her principles and reading, and then finding a group. And April's going to talk on that a little bit later about finding your tribe, your people. When I first moved here, I actually had kind of given up even trying to find and interact with. I mean, there were some things that I interacted with for, like, you know, for my kids' sake. I don't want to keep them in a bubble. But, you know, we did music and we did other things. But for myself as a mom, I thought, I will never find anybody that I completely connect with. And it was very, very isolating. And there were many tears and many prayers. And me just, you know, my husband, we were our best friends. I mean, you know, my husband doesn't like a latte like ladies do. So that's a little different. But we need that connection. We need some people who understand and can walk alongside of us. And when the girls, it was Jennifer. Where you at, Jennifer? Where you at? Oh, there she is. She just asked a simple question on the P24 website or on the Facebook page. Who knows? You know, anybody? Is there anyone here interested in Charlotte Mason? And that opened up a whole window of opportunity for us, and that's why we're here today. So thank you, Jennifer. You got it started. So we're going to go ahead and start today, and I'm going to do this, which seems really, really weird, but it helps me because I'm going to film this for ladies who could not be here. But I'm going to smack my hands, and it's like the directors throwing the, you know, slapping the thing so that I can match my audio from my phone to my camera, okay? I just didn't want y'all to think I was crazy. Okay, so we're going to start first by talking about Shakespeare, and Shakespeare seems like a very, very daunting subject for a lot of moms, especially when it's just you and you're looking at your fresh-faced, you know, 9-year-old, you're thinking, how am I going to convey what the bard has said to these children? Especially if you don't have a really strong background in Shakespeare yourself, okay? My exposure to Shakespeare was in 9th and 10th grade. The 9th grade we did Romeo and Juliet. 10th grade was Julius Caesar. Only thing I remember from Julius Caesar was watching it and the "Et tu, Brute," you know, that dramatic scene of him being, you know, deceived by his own friend. That's really all I remember from Julius Caesar. But I remember a lot more from Romeo and Juliet, not just because it's romantic, and I was in the 9th grade. I mean, really, what girl did not like reading Romeo and Juliet? But my teacher at the time, she was not a great teacher of like grammar, and she taught grammar, she taught literature, and all those things in high school. That's not where she shone. Where she shone was teaching Shakespeare, because she let Shakespeare speak for himself. We were able to read through it. She assigned parts. We just read through it, and then we were finished. We ended up watching the play, and she had also coordinated that because there was going to be a troop come in to town. Well, one of the near towns. I say near town, it's 2 hours away. Okay, it's just how you live in West Virginia. You're away from a lot of things. But we went to Charleston, West Virginia, to watch this dramatic, Romeo and Juliet, and it was fantastic. I walked in, the experience was wonderful because it was in a theater I had never been in before, and they had the plush velvet seats and the gilt around the edges of the room, and the ceiling was domed and painted with all these little naked angels and stuff. It was fantastic. To a 9th grader who hadn't even been out of the state yet, it was fantastic, and it blew me away because we read those words and then we saw them acted out and interpreted, and they were the same. It wasn't adapted. It was what it was. So Charlotte Mason says, let a child have the meat he requires in history readings and the literature which naturally gathers around this history, and imagination will bestir itself without any help of ours. The child will live out in detail 1,000 scenes of which he only gets the merest hint. And there have been phrases and things from those two, mostly Romeo and Juliet, that I have heard throughout my life that I understand more and know the context in which we speak them in our own culture. And I was listening to a Delectable Education's podcast on Shakespeare today, just to kind of refresh my mind. If you want a good reason to read Shakespeare, listen to their podcast, because they talk so heavily about how he influenced our vocabulary today. So many thousands of, I think it was like estimated 24,000 words that Shakespeare introduced into the English language by using, prefixes and compound words, and just using words in different ways, making nouns verbs and verbs nouns and that type of thing. So we've had a major, he has had a major imprint on our language. Not only that, the plays themselves, I like a good psychological thriller. Who doesn't? I like the twists, I like the turns, and Shakespeare offers those things. Not necessarily a psychological thriller, but there are a lot of elements in his plays that are deep. And as an adult, you can watch them and understand those deep things. But as a child, you might kind of glaze over them, but you will get a great story out of it nonetheless, right? So Charlotte says in volume 6, which is a philosophy of education, she says, and I'm kind of hopping in the middle of her thought here, form 2B, and I believe 2B is around 4th and 5th grade, if I'm not mistaken. She says, has a considerable program of reading. That is not the mere mechanical exercise of reading, but the reading of certain books. Therefore, it is necessary that 2 years should be spent in Form 1A, and those are your youngers, and that the second of these 2 years, the children should read a good deal of work for themselves. Okay? But in 2B, they read their own geography, history, and poetry, but perhaps Shakespeare's Twelfth Night, or say Scott's Rob Roy or Gulliver's Travels, should be read to them and narrated by them until they are well into their 10th year. Now, not 10th grade year necessarily, but their 10th of age. Their power to understand, visualize, and tell a play of Shakespeare from 9 years old onwards is very surprising. They put in nothing which is not there, but they miss nothing and display a passage or a scene in a sort of curious relief. 1 or 2 books of the caliber of the Heroes of Asgard are also included in the program for the term. And she goes on to mention some other things. So you wonder, okay, is my kid ready for Shakespeare? Well, some of the books that Charlotte had already scheduled and Shakespeare is considered literature in the Charlotte Mason and where she categorized it. Like the book of the Heroes of Asgard, and they're also like fables, Greek myths. your children have already been exposed to all of those things. If you're following right along with Charlotte here, and that's where she's going, your children have already been exposed to these myths and tales. So we're just stepping it up a notch. We're just bringing in maybe a little weightier tales, and Shakespeare himself draws on myths and legends and all of these things as well. So on Charlotte Mason poetry, I kind of pulled from a little bit of what Nancy Kelly has said. She did a little study on how Mason introduced and what she introduced and what they did at read, and they kind of fluctuated throughout the years. You're not going to want your kids to read every Shakespeare play, okay? I'm going to be honest with you. There's Shakespeare plays I don't want to read, just because they are maybe a little weightier. So we do start with these lighter plays in the early years. So in Form 2, they would have read, it has an order of frequency here. We have Macbeth, Coriolanus, Henry VIII, Henry V. There's Twelfth Night, Merchant of Venice, which we read as a co-op, and I'll explain how we do that in a co-op setting in a little bit. Merchant of Venice, Midsummer Night's Dream, there's Julius Caesar, King John, and The Tempest, and As You Like It. And those were the plays that they considered proper for Form 2, and those would be when you're starting out in those younger years. And as a mom and you have multiple children, let's say you have a 12-year-old and a 9-year-old, do we do the same plays or do we do different? You can do the same play. To me, it would be way too difficult to try to do 2 plays with multiple children. Just keep it simple, do the one play, okay? Now, when your high schoolers get on the upper end, let's say junior and senior year, they necessarily don't have Shakespeare to read. They go on to other literature from that time, according to Charlotte's program, okay? But between that and Plutarch, and we'll get to Plutarch in just a minute. So how do you do Shakespeare? Okay, it's very, very simple. I started when I wanted to delve into Shakespeare. I went with simply Charlotte Mason's booklet here. This one was Taming of the Shrew, and that was the first one we did, and we really enjoyed it. And this one was done at home with 3 of my daughters, and what we did was to keep up with what we were doing. Now this one, of course, is Julius Caesar here, but I have. Sometimes I find these at the library. They have them on sale for like 25 cents, and I collect all the Shakespeare that I can get my hands on, just so that each of my kids can have their own copy when we read. And when I make a video of this, and in the description link below, I will put links to all of the things that I'm talking about. And probably tomorrow I will have you all a handout. I'm going to email you because it has links. That's the reason I didn't hand it out to you, is because it will have links on there, and it won't do you any good if they're just in black and white. So, but one of the links will be a link to this Etsy shop, and I'm not affiliated with this lady, but I think it's a fabulous idea. You can even do this yourself at home. This has Julius Caesar, and this is the cast of Julius Caesar. And over here are little lines by each name. And what we do is we go down and assign people, and we all write who is reading what. Because when you close that book and then you go on to do something else and you come back the next time to read that, you are not going to remember. Mm-hmm. And then there's a big fight and people leave the room. I mean, ask me how I know, okay? Because, it could get quite ugly. So what we did was we wrote down who was reading what, and then we highlighted ours in our own special color, just so that this one was actually Ben's here, and which I can't believe you let me get him the pink marker. But anyway, we just highlighted it so that as we're reading through and you see somebody's name, you can look really quickly at your highlighted list, especially if there's a lot of characters, and you go, oh, that's me, I'm next. So these are really, really handy. But with simply Charlotte Mason in their books here, and this is recommended grades 6 to 12 here in the beginning, and the quick, I'll just kind of give you, they prescribe Shakespeare in 3 steps. It is read the story, hear the script, watch the play. There you go. And that's really all there is to it. So with this, it just kind of breaks it up and tells you what to read in there, and then to hear the script, which is what we did. We did this exact same thing here. Archangel Productions has really great audio of Shakespeare, and you can get those if you have the Hoopla app. Those are all on the Hoopla app for free, and they're wonderful to listen to. And as a mom, if you want to do a little prep beforehand and listen to it yourself before you sit down to read it with the kids, it can help you kind of get the connotation of words and inflection and all of that, and help you to not mispronounce things. Because have you heard? You do not want to hear this voice try to butcher Greek names. Okay, it gets really, really bad. But if you listen to it beforehand, it can really help you hammer out some of those things that you might. It could even hold you up if the kids are sitting there, trying to pronounce this name and they're going you could kind of give it to them and then go on, so it's not it doesn't kind of hold you up. So that's how we did it at home. Okay. Now, this past year, we did it in a co-op setting, which was fantastic. And I did it just a little bit differently, just because I wanted to connect the kids a little more. And I think even if we do Shakespeare at home without a co-op, I will still do it this way. So what I did first was I read a good adaptation, okay? And this book right here I found, and I did not want to read an adaptation to the kids if it wasn't a good adaptation. I found this book by Leon Garfield. I will also have, this will be a link on the paper. It's a really in-depth, it doesn't have all of Shakespeare's plays in it, obviously, but it's just really good, and it does draw on some of the words that are already in the play. It gives you a great context. It was just really great. The kids loved reading this book, and it made us want to read the actual play. That's the thing. If you read something and you're going, I can take it or leave it. But when you find a book that you read and your kids are like, I want more, then you know you have found a good book. So I started with this with my group. Like I said, you could skip it, but I found it very helpful. I went through and looked at a few vocabulary words for myself, not to give the kids, but just so that I know when we're reading through, some things. Because, Shakespeare can be a little tongue-in-cheek sometimes, and it goes over kids' heads, and then parents, your kids might be calling each other things that you don't want them to call each other from Shakespeare. So you want to check some of those things out before you get in that situation. Difficult pronunciations as well, just to look through. It doesn't mean you have to read the whole play yourself, just kind of, even if it's before, you're going to read it, kind of just, go down through it a little bit. When we got ready to sit down and read the play itself, I asked my kids, do you all know any famous lines from this play? And then if they did or they didn't, I may add one or two myself and say, did you know that this one was? Because we did a Merchant of Venice, and there were so many things you're like, hey, that's where this came from. When you say a pound of flesh, we literally know what that means now, and it's fantastic that we can, to bring that Shakespeare into our modern culture and understand where it came from. So I asked the kids if they knew any lines, and then, since it was Venice, I pulled up this website that had all these fantastic, things you did.